In these example problems, we are going to be looking at the topic zero factor property, and we're going to be doing two example problems here. So all the zero factor property is that it tells us after we factor our equations, we then set all our factors equal to 0 in order to get an answer. So looking at example 9, we have x cubed plus 4x squared minus 12x equals 0. Since we have an x cubed in our problem, that tells us we're going to have 3 potential answers. That also tells us that we need to see if we can take out a GCF because we've only learned how to factor quadratic equations so far. So for number 9, I am going to factor out an x. So I'm left with x squared plus 4x minus 12 equals 0. I'm going to go ahead and ignore that GCF for now, and I'm just going to worry about factoring what is inside the parentheses. And I'm going to do that using the AC method. So I'm going to do a times c, which is 1 times negative 12, which gives me negative 12, and our b value is 4. So I need two numbers that multiply to negative 12 but add to 4. And those two numbers are going to be negative 6 times 2 because they multiply to negative 12 but they add to, oh, I made a mistake here. It's not negative 6 and positive 2. It's 6 times negative 2 because we want a positive 4 when we add them together. Now I'm going to take those numbers and I'm going to expand my 4x. So I have x squared plus 6x minus 2x minus 12 equals 0. Now that I have 4 terms, I'm going to do factor by grouping and take the GCF out of each part. So in the first part, I can take out an x, and I'm left with x plus 6. And since I want my parentheses to match, in the second parenthesis, I'm going to take out a negative 2, so I'm left with x plus 6. So that means I have the factors x plus 6 and x minus 2. And then I can't forget about that GCF I took out in the beginning, so I'm going to attach that x to the outside of my problem. Now I have 3 factors. I have x plus 6, and x minus 2 equals 0. The zero factor property states that I can set each of these factors equal to 0 separately. So I have x equals 0, x plus 6 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0, which means my first answer is x equals 0. Subtract 6, and my second answer is x equals negative 6. Add 2, and my last answer is x is equal to 2. So these are my 3 answers for this example problem number 9. Now let's look at the next example problem, number 20. And this time we have fractions. So we have 1/3 x squared plus 7/12 x is equal to 5/8. So the first thing we need to do is we need to have this equation set equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract the 5/8 over. So 1/3 x squared plus 7/12 x minus 5/8 equals 0. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all these fractions, okay, because it's a lot easier to deal with whole numbers than it is fractions. So in order to do this, I need to find a common denominator between 3, 12, and 8. So 3, 12, and 8. Give you a moment to think about that. And the common denominator, so the lowest common denominator that we could choose is 24. So if we want our denominator to be 24, that means we're going to have to multiply each fraction in order for our current denominator to be 24. So for this first one, I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 8. Second one, I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 2. And then lastly, top and bottom by 3. Okay? So when I do that, I get 8 over 24x squared plus 14 over 24x minus 15 over 24 equals 0. Since they are now all over 24, I could cancel out those bottoms. So I have 8x squared plus 14x minus 15 equals 0. Another way you could have done this is you could have just multiplied the entire equation by 24, and you would still get this same answer. Okay. So now that I have everything in proper form, I see if I can take out a GCF, which I cannot. So I'm going to jump straight to the AC method. So I have A times C, which is 8 times negative 15. So let's see. What we get. That's negative 120. And our B value is 14. So I need two factors of negative 20 that's going to add to 14. So let's see. Let's look up what these factors of 120 are. So we have 1 and 120. We have 2 and 60. We have 3 and 40. We have 4 and 30. We have 5 and 24. We have 6 and 20. 8 and 15. And then lastly, 10 and 12. And of course, all these combinations can be manipulated with negatives and so on and so forth. So out of all of these multiples of 120, it looks like the closest we could get here is this 6 and 20. But one of them would have to be negative in order for us to get a negative 120. So that negative would be the 6. So negative 6 plus 20 is positive 14. Multiplied together, we get negative 120. So expanding our middle term, we get 8x squared plus 20x minus 6x minus 15 equals 0. So now we are factor by grouping and taking out a GCF from each one. So for the first one, we can take out a 4x, and we are left with 2x plus 5. And since we want our parentheses to match, we can take out a negative 3, and we are left with 2x plus 5. So that means I have the factors 4x minus 3 and 2x plus 5 is equal to 0. But according to the zero factor property, I can set each one equal to 0 to get my answer. So my first answer, once I get x by itself, is going to be x equals 3/4. And then my next answer, once I get x by itself, is going to be x is equal to negative 5/2.